My brother called me at 2:47 in the morning, and the first thing I heard wasn't his voice. It was the silence before it. That kind of silence that only comes from a grown man trying to remember how to breathe. I'd been asleep maybe 3 hours. My phone lit up, and I saw his name. Zach. And I did what any self-respecting 56-year-old man does when his phone rings at 2 a.m. I assumed someone was dead. I wasn't entirely wrong. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, every villain in these stories thought they were the smartest person in the room. They were not. Subscribe so you never miss a story. Zach. I sat up. Talk to me. Nothing. Then a sound that I can only describe as a dam deciding it had held long enough. My twin brother, 6'1", 210 pounds, the man who once dislocated his own shoulder in a bar fight and finished his beer before going to the hospital, was sobbing. Not crying. Sobbing. The kind that makes your chest do things chests aren't designed to do. I didn't say anything for a full minute. I just held the phone and let him go. Because when Zach cries, you don't interrupt. You wait. You respect the magnitude of the occasion. When he finally found words, they came out broken and small. Wade, I can't do this anymore. Do what? This. Her. Everything. I can't. He stopped. Tried again. 33 years, man. 33 years and I don't even know who I am. I turned on the lamp. This was going to take a while. You need to understand something about Zach and me. We're identical twins, which sounds like a fun party trick until you realize it means your entire childhood is one long argument about which one of you is which. Our mother used to dress us in different colors just so she could tell us apart. Zach was always blue. I was always green. By the time we were teenagers, Zach joked that even our own mother needed a color-coded system to love us individually. We grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the sons of a mechanic and a school librarian. We played football together, got in trouble together, graduated together, and then life did what life does. It pulled us in different directions. Zach went into architecture. I became a corporate attorney. He moved to Charlotte. I stayed in Columbus. We talked every Sunday without fail, and saw each other at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the occasional disaster. This qualified as a disaster. By the time the phone call ended, it was 4:30 a.m., and I had 3 pages of notes on a legal pad. What I'd written down was bad enough. What I suspected was worse. Jessica Campers, formerly Jessica Hartley, architect of her own mythology, had spent 33 years building a very specific kind of prison, the kind with no bars you can point to. The kind where, if you try to describe your cell to someone, they look at you funny and say, "But she seems so nice." She controlled the money. Every account, every card, every dollar that flowed through that household moved because she decided it would. Zach had a joint account that she monitored like air traffic control. He received an allowance. I want you to sit with that word for a moment. An allowance. The man designed commercial buildings for a living, and received an allowance from his wife like a 12-year-old who'd done his chores. She controlled his time. His friendships had been slowly, methodically pruned over the years. Greg, his best friend since college, had been edged out after Jessica decided Greg's wife Sarah was a bad influence. Austin, his old football teammate, got frozen out after a camping trip Jessica hadn't approved. Ben, his work colleague who'd become a genuine friend, was tolerated only because cutting off work relationships might look bad. She controlled his self-image. There's a technique some people have. I've seen it in depositions. I've seen it in boardrooms. And I've seen it in bad marriages, where you never say anything outright terrible. You just say things that erode. Little observations. Little sighs. Little corrections disguised as concern. Are you sure you want to wear that? Isn't criticism. It's care. Unless it happens every single day for 33 years, at which point it is something else entirely. I hung up the phone as the sun was coming up over Columbus. I sat in my kitchen with cold coffee and 3 pages of notes, and I thought about my brother's voice, about the silence before he spoke, about 33 years. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to do the most illegal, ethically questionable, and deeply satisfying thing I'd ever done in my legal career. I drove to Charlotte the following weekend. Zach opened the door, and for a half-second we just looked at each other the way twins do. This strange biological mirror that never quite stops being unsettling. He'd lost weight. His eyes had that flat quality that happens when someone's been running on empty for so long they've forgotten what full feels like. "You look terrible," I said. "You look like me," he said. So what does that say about you? We went for a walk, just the two of us, and he told me everything. The whole geography of it. The way she'd made the house feel like a place he was permitted to occupy. The way she talked about him to people. Always this slight smile, this fond exasperation, as if he were a lovable idiot she'd generously taken on. The way money disappeared into accounts he couldn't fully access. How she'd convinced him, over decades, that his instincts were wrong, his memory was faulty, and his feelings were an inconvenience. You know what the worst part is, he said. We were sitting on a bench near a park, watching a kid try to fly a kite in completely insufficient wind. I keep thinking it's my fault. I keep thinking there must be something I did wrong, something I missed. 33 years and I'm still trying to figure out what I did to deserve this. I looked at him. You didn't do anything. I know that. In my head, I know that, but... Zach. I turned to face him fully. I'm a lawyer. I have spent my adult life listening to people describe situations and identifying what the actual problem is. You want to know what the actual problem is? Enlighten me. The actual problem is a 54-year-old woman who has built her entire identity around controlling a 56-year-old man and has been so successful at it that the man now blames himself. That's the problem. That is the complete and total problem. He was quiet for a moment. The kid's kite had given up and was lying flat on the grass. So what do? I looked at him for a long time. A plan was forming. It was a bad plan in the way that all great plans are bad plans. Audacious, risky, and almost certainly inadvisable. I had a feeling if I mentioned it to any of my colleagues back in Columbus, they would gently suggest I seek therapy. How much do we still look alike? I asked. He frowned. What? You and me. Right now. How much do we still look alike? He stared at me, then slowly understanding crossed his face like a sunrise. Wade. No. I haven't said anything yet. You don't have to. I know that look. You had that same look when you convinced me to steal Mr. Patterson's garden gnome in 1985. That gnome was on public property, technically, and this is completely different. Wade. 30 days, I said. Give me 30 days. It took 2 weeks to arrange. I cleared my schedule. Not easy, but not impossible. I am a senior partner at my firm, which means I have both the authority to take a leave and the professional reputation to make it look like a choice rather than an absence. I told my assistant Sarah I was dealing with a family matter, which was technically accurate and will go down as the understatement of my career. Zach briefed me on everything, and I mean everything. The layout of the house, Jessica's routine. She woke at 6:15, drank green tea, went to her book club on Tuesdays, had lunch with her friend Ashley on Thursdays, and attended church on Sundays with the devotion of someone who understood that a good reputation required maintenance. I learned her friends' names, her triggers, her conversational habits, her opinions on the neighbors. I also learned about the money. Zach walked me through it with the tired precision of a man who'd spent years trying to understand a system designed to confuse him. 4 accounts, 3 of them under her primary control. 1 joint account that she reviewed daily. He was paid well, very well, but you'd never know it from his access to his own earnings. She moves money around, he said. If I ask about it, she says she's investing or saving or handling something. She has all the login information. I have a debit card with a rolling limit she sets. I wrote all of this down. One more thing, he said. She's charming. I want you to understand that. When she's in public, when she's with people who matter to her, she is genuinely warm and funny, and people love her. The Ashley and Greg and everyone they know, they all think she's wonderful. So if you go in there expecting her to show her hand immediately, she won't. You'll have to be patient, Zach, I said. I have cross-examined sitting federal judges. I have patience. I didn't know it yet, but patient was going to be the least interesting word for what the next 30 days required. The swap happened on a Monday morning. Zach drove to Columbus, told Jessica he had a conference for a few days, which was apparently a normal enough occurrence that she simply said, fine, don't forget the Hendersons thing on Saturday. And we spent 4 days doing the final briefing. We are identical twins. We have been our entire lives. But somewhere in our 50s, life had written slightly different things on our faces. Zach had a scar on his left forearm from a table saw. I had reading glasses I didn't need to wear. We matched our haircuts. I stopped wearing the glasses. I practiced his walk, slightly more cautious than mine, slightly smaller, which made something in my chest tighten in a way I didn't examine too closely. I drove to Charlotte on a Friday evening. Jessica was in the kitchen when I came through the door. She glanced up. "You're late," she said. Not hello, not welcome home, just the correction. "Traffic was bad," I said. She turned back to whatever she was chopping. "There's food in the fridge." I already ate. Day 1. Hour 1. And that was the greeting. I went to bed that night in my brother's bed, in my brother's house, next to a woman who had no idea she was sleeping next to the wrong person. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and thought, 30 days. You have 30 days. I also thought, this is genuinely insane. Here is the thing about documenting abuse. It is tedious. I know that sounds wrong. It should be dramatic. It should be like a thriller, every moment loaded with tension. And some moments were. But a lot of it was just, Tuesday. Jessica at breakfast. You're making your coffee wrong. You always make it too strong. Jessica reviewing the bank statement on her laptop, angling the screen so I couldn't see. Jessica on the phone with Ashley, laughing in a way she never laughed when it was just the two of us in a room. Jessica explaining to me, with remarkable patience, why my opinion on repainting the living room was wrong, had always been wrong, and would continue to be wrong regardless of how many times I expressed it. I recorded all of it. Small digital recorder. Later, my phone. I developed a habit of leaving my phone on the counter, face down, charging. It caught everything within 15 feet. The financial stuff was where it got genuinely interesting. On the third day, I told her I needed to see the investment account statements. She lipped up from her book with the expression of someone who has heard a puppy express an opinion on geopolitics. Why? Because it's my money too, and I'd like to know what's happening with it. A pause. The pause of someone recalibrating. She wasn't used to pushback. Zach had told me this. She'd pushed him so far down that even asking a question had felt to him like an act of rebellion. "I'm handling it," she said. "I know you're handling it. I want to see how it's being handled." Another pause. Then, "I'll pull it up later." She never pulled it up. I asked 4 more times over 10 days. Each time there was a reason. She was busy. She'd forgotten. The website was slow. She'd meant to, and then the Hendersons called. On day 12, I called the bank directly, which I could do because I was, from the bank's legal perspective, Zach Campers. I had his ID, his social security number, his everything. What I found there was remarkable. Not illegal, necessarily. Clever. She'd structured things so that the bulk of Zach's salary flowed through an account that was technically joint, and then dispersed from there into accounts that were technically hers. The allowance system wasn't informal. She'd made it structural. I photographed everything. I sent copies to myself from Zach's email, and I called a divorce attorney in Charlotte named Patricia Haynes, who came highly recommended, and who, when I laid out the financial architecture of my brother's marriage, let out a long breath and said, "Well, that's thorough." "She's careful," I said. "She is," Patricia agreed. "But so are we." I didn't know it yet, but Patricia Haynes was going to be the most important phone call of the entire 30 days. Week 2 is when Jessica started pushing harder. I think on some level, she sensed something was different. Not that I was a different person. She never for a single moment suspected that. But that the person she was dealing with wasn't absorbing things the way she expected. Zach, over 33 years, had been trained to deflect, absorb, and retreat. I had no such training. I had 30 years of legal practice and a natural disposition that my assistant Sarah once described as aggressively unbothered. "You're being strange," Jessica said one evening. We were watching television, which she controlled with the focused authority of a military commander. "Am I?" I said. "You haven't apologized for the thing with the groceries." I didn't think I needed to. Full look. The look Zach had warned me about. The one that was designed to make you feel like you'd said something wrong, even before you'd fully processed whether you had. "You forgot the oat milk," she said. "I specifically asked you. I got regular milk. We have a fridge. The milk goes in it. The outcome is similar." She stared at me for another moment. "You're in a mood." "I'm perfectly fine, Jessica." But something had shifted in the room. She was recalibrating again. I could feel it. The Ashley lunch happened on a Thursday, and this was a gift. Ashley, who was lovely, genuinely, came to pick Jessica up, and the two of them stood in the kitchen while I was ostensibly reading in the next room, and Jessica said something that I want to engrave on a very small trophy and give to Patricia Haynes. "He's been difficult lately," Jessica said. Her voice had that fond exasperation quality. "You know how he gets." "What happened?" Ashley asked. A sigh. He forgets things, he argues about things that don't matter, and then when I try to help him, he acts like I'm attacking him. I honestly don't know how much more I can manage. Manage. The word sat in the air. My phone was on the kitchen counter. Charging day 19 was the day I called Zachary. Zachary had been one of Zach's closest friends at the firm. Another architect, sharp and funny, who'd gradually been made to feel unwelcome by a series of small social rejections that all, somehow, traced back to Jessica having a conflict, or Jessica not feeling up to it, or Jessica finding Zachary's wife slightly abrasive. Zach hadn't seen him in over a year. I called him from Zach's phone. "Hey," I said. "It's Zach. I know it's been a while." There was a pause. "Zach." His voice was careful. Yeah, it has. I want to apologize for that, and I want to have a conversation about some things that are happening. I'd like to invite you to a dinner, family and friends, 2 weeks from now." Another pause. "Is everything okay?" "It will be," I said. I also called Austin, and I called Greg, and I called Zach's cousin Sarah, who'd been kept at arm's length for 2 years over an incident Jessica had described as an insult, but which, when I heard Zach's version, had been a throwaway comment at a birthday party. I called Zach's daughter Ashley from his first marriage, a brief one, before Jessica, who lived in Atlanta and who had told Zach 3 years ago plainly that she didn't like his wife and was sorry to say it. Zach's Ashley said, when I called, "It's about time." I spent the remaining days building the guest list and doing the quieter, more important work with Patricia Haynes. The financial reorganization, account closures, asset documentation. Patricia was efficient and thorough and had a voice like warm gravel. And every time I updated her, she said, "Good," with the satisfaction of someone who genuinely enjoyed doing this particular kind of work. On day 28, Zach drove back to Charlotte. We met at a coffee shop 2 miles from the house. He looked better. A month of breathing room had put color back into his face. He looked like me again, which for twins is the most precise measure of restored health I can offer. "How is she?" he asked. "She's fine. She missed you in the way a chess player misses a particular piece. You're not a spouse to her, Zach. You're infrastructure. I mean that as an observation, not an insult." He nodded slowly. He knew. The accounts are moved. Patricia has everything she needs. The dinner is set for Saturday night. I slid a folder across the table. "That's 30 days. He picked it up, opened it. I watched his face as he read through it. The transcripts, the financial documents, the notes, the recordings logged by date and content. I watched the expression change from reading to recognition. The specific recognition of seeing your own life written down in someone else's handwriting. He closed the folder. 33 years, he said quietly. "Yeah, I kept thinking I was overreacting." "You weren't." He looked up. "What happened Saturday?" I told him. He was quiet for a long time. Then, for the first time in our entire conversation, he smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small, quiet, deeply satisfied one. "You know," he said, "you always were the meaner twin." "I'm the justice twin," I said. "There's a difference." Saturday arrived the way important days always arrive. Suspiciously normal right up until it isn't. Jessica had been told it was a dinner party. She loved dinner parties. She was magnificent at them. I had come to understand the purest form of her. The public version. The warm and funny and effortlessly charming version. And she had thrown herself into preparation with genuine enthusiasm. She'd made lamb. Of course she had. The guests arrived between 6:30 and 7. Zachary and his wife. Austin, who'd driven 3 hours and looked exactly like a man who'd driven 3 hours and would do it again. Greg and Sarah, who arrived together with the careful restraint of people who have been told something significant is going to happen, and are doing their best not to look like they know. Ashley, Zach's daughter, 31 years old, with his eyes and his stubborn jaw, came in and gave me a hug that was warm and correct, and showed no sign that she knew exactly who she was hugging. Cousin Sarah, who kissed my cheek and whispered, "We're all here." 3 of Zach's neighbors, who genuinely didn't know anything was happening, and were just there for the lamb. And Patricia Haynes, who came last, introduced herself as a friend, and found a seat near the back. Jessica was radiant. This was her stage. She moved through her own dining room with the confidence of a woman who had never, in her adult life, been surprised by anything she hadn't planned. That was about to change. Dinner was served, eaten, complimented appropriately. The lamb was, in fairness, excellent. I will give her that. And then I stood up. I want to thank everyone for coming, I said. 12 faces turned toward me. Jessica looked up with a proprietorial sort of pleasure, like this was going to be a toast to her. I have some things I'd like to share. It'll take a few minutes. I'd ask everyone to stay seated. I pulled out my tablet. I'd prepared this carefully, edited the recordings down to the most illustrative moments, the clearest examples, arranged them in a sequence that told a coherent story. Not the most sensational moments. I wanted clarity, not theater. Jessica's smile began to change shape. What is... she started. Jessica, I said pleasantly, please let me finish. The first recording played, her voice crisp and clear through the tablet speaker, explaining to Zach, to me, technically, why his opinion on the living room color didn't merit serious consideration. The fond condescension in her voice had a different quality when projected in a dining room full of people who thought they knew her. Ashley, Zach's daughter, went very still. The second recording. The kitchen conversation about managing him. Ashley from next door looked at the table, the financial documents. I walked through them the way I'd walked through exhibits in court, methodically, without drama, with the specific confidence that comes from having structured the presentation so well that the facts carry the weight. I didn't need to editorializing. The numbers spoke with perfect clarity. Jessica stood up. This is absolutely. I'm not finished, I said. I don't know what this is or what you think you're doing. Sit down, Jessica. My voice was quiet. She sat down. 30 years of courtrooms have a way of investing certain tones with an authority that isn't easily argued with. I finished. I set down the tablet. I looked at Patricia Haynes, who gave a small nod, and I looked at the door. Zach walked in. I don't have a good way to describe the moment when your identical twin brother walks into a room where everyone thought you were already sitting at the head of the table. The geometry of it breaks something in the brain. You see people's eyes go from him to me and back again, running the calculation that doesn't compute, arriving at the conclusion that shouldn't be possible but clearly is. Jessica's face went through approximately 4 different expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, something approaching understanding, and then the one I'd been waiting for, a kind of free fall. Zach walked to the table. He stood across from her. The room was completely silent. He looked at her for a long moment. He'd told me what he wanted to say. He'd written it out, revised it, and memorized it like a closing statement. But standing there, in front of everyone, he set all of it aside. Did you even notice? He said. That's all I want to know. For 30 days, a completely different person was living in this house, and you had no idea. Did you actually not notice, or did you just not care? The silence was profound. Jessica's mouth opened, closed. 33 years, Zach said. And you never once actually saw me. He looked at Patricia Haynes. She opened her bag, produced an envelope, and placed it on the table in front of Jessica. Divorce filings, I said helpfully. You've been served. Technically, you were served before dinner, which means you made excellent lamb under considerable legal pressure. So, respect for that at least. Nobody laughed. Fair enough. Jessica looked at the envelope. She looked at Zach. She looked at me. Something was happening in her face that I'd never seen there before in 30 days of living in her house. Something that looked very much like genuine reckoning. You can't, she said. After everything I've done. Patricia, Zach said. Patricia stood up. She was 5'4" and had been practicing law for 27 years and had a voice that commanded rooms considerably larger than this dining room. Mrs. Campers, I'd advise you to consult your own counsel before saying anything further this evening. The financial documentation is comprehensive and has already been reviewed by 2 independent CPAs. The property questions are well in hand. You'll want a lawyer. Ashley, Zach's daughter, walked to her father and put her hand on his arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Greg, who had not spoken all evening, who had sat with the contained stillness of a man doing enormous emotional work, looked at Jessica and said, 33 years of Sunday dinners, and I never knew. He shook his head. I never knew. Jessica looked around the room. She was looking for the audience she'd cultivated, the social capital she'd maintained, the warm impression she'd carefully built, and kept polished. She was doing an inventory. I could see her doing it. Every face she found gave her back the same thing. Witnesses. I drove back to Columbus the next morning. Zach walked me out to my car as the sun was doing its thing over Charlotte. So what happens now? I asked. Patricia thinks it'll be 8 months, maybe 10. She's already reached out to Jessica's side through official channels. He paused. The house goes to me. The accounts are restructured. I'll be fine. You'll be better than fine. He looked at me. Same face, same eyes. 33 years of different stories written on identical bones. You know what the strangest part of the last month was, he said. You went in there, spent 30 days in my life, and apparently pushed back more in 30 days than I had in 33 years. To be fair, I said, I didn't have 33 years of conditioning. No, he nodded. You just had a very long phone call and a legal pad. We stood there for a moment in the morning quiet. Green, he said suddenly. What? Mom always dressed you in green. You were blue, I said. Yeah, he smiled. I was always blue. He didn't mean it as a joke, and I didn't take it as one. I put my hand on his shoulder, the way you do with someone who is, at a cellular level, the person you know best in the world. Not anymore, I said. I have been asked in the months since whether I regret any of it. The deception, the month-long impersonation, the dinner, the whole elaborate architecture of a plan that, if I'm being a licensed attorney about it, existed in a legal gray area I'd rather not examine too closely in writing. Here's what I regret. Nothing. Here's what I think about. The silence on the phone at 2:47 a.m. The sound of my brother remembering how to breathe. The way he looked when he walked through that dining room door, still uncertain, still carrying 33 years of a smaller version of himself, but walking, moving forward. Eyes open, Patricia Haynes finalized the divorce 9 months later. Zach got the house, a fair division of the assets, and the clean documentation of a financial history that no reasonable court was going to interpret favorably toward Jessica. Jessica got her lawyer's fees and a Charlotte social circle that had quietly reorganized itself in his absence. I got a text from Zach at 6:03 on a Tuesday morning that said only, "It's done." I sat with that for a minute. Then I texted back, "Green." He sent back, "Blue." And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the end of the story. Except for one last thing. About 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Charlotte area code. I listened to it once, deleted it, and have never mentioned it to Zach. It was Jessica. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. Her voice was quiet in a way I'd never heard it during 30 days in her house. She said, "I know you think you understand what happened in that marriage. You don't. You saw 30 days. I lived 33 years. A pause. But I know what I did. I've always known. Another pause. Tell Zach." She stopped. Didn't finish. The message ended. I've thought about that voicemail more than I expected to. Not with sympathy, exactly. Not with softness. More with the specific recognition that the worst people often know exactly what they are and keep going anyway. That knowing doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. But that's her story to carry. Mine ends at a Charlotte dining room door, watching my brother walk in. Watching her face, as the math finally added up. Watching 33 years of carefully constructed control meet 30 days of someone who simply hadn't been taught to absorb it. Zach Campers walked into that room and sat down at the head of his own table for what felt like the first time. He looked free. And that, for a man who drove to Charlotte on a Friday with a legal pad and a very bad idea, was plenty. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.